Hello everybody and welcome to week 1. So by now you should have gone through your Welcome and Start Here tab, and you should have gone through your syllabus quiz and gotten familiar with the shell, and now you're moving into your course content section. And so this week in week 1 we're really looking at a very broad set of issues. And so as you can see from the title, we're looking at things about what is justice, we're thinking and visualizing about what it means to read critically, and we're also thinking about justice methodologies. So how do we collect information on these topics of justice, and how do we do that kind of data collection justly? So you have 2 infographics that I want you to look at. The first one is how to read a scientific paper. The second one is about logical fallacies. And so these are nice, easy ways to get you into thinking about being critical of the things that you're looking at, being able to look at, say, an academic journal article and assess the information and critically analyze the information. And then as you move into your actual reading for this week, you will notice that they all cover a very broad set of topics. And so first you have Michael Sandel's excerpt from his book, Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do? And when we're looking at this, he gives a lot of scenarios. He gives a lot of information about these sort of what ifs, these moral dilemmas that we have when we think about what is it that we're doing? What could we be doing? Why do we not do something and do something else? And so as you're reading those and as you watch his videos, I want you to really think, often we have the benefit of looking at things after they've happened. So for example, when he talks about the Afghan goat herders, and so when we don't have that benefit to then say, oh, well, of course I would have done this, instead, and we have to make decisions in the moment, how do we make those decisions? And where does how we made those decisions come from? So for a lot of us, it's our upbringing, it's our religion, it's our culture, it's our family. All of these things play into how we make the decisions that we make. But ultimately, as we study this concept of justice, it's important for us to recognize what is just and how do we make those decisions, and really recognizing sort of the underlying morality that has to do with talking about justice. You'll also read about theory a little bit, and so Bell Hooks's article about theory as a liberatory practice is really trying to take theory and embrace it, and look at theory not just as this heady sort of, oh, only really smart people do theory, and instead making it about theorizing from lived experience and making it theory and practice together rather than 2 distinct and opposing ideas. And so for her, theorizing came out of pain. And so I want you to think about these notions of theory as being liberatory, and then theory as being used as not liberatory in many ways. You will also read John Rawls's excerpts from John Rawls's What is Justice? You read The Role of Justice, 2 Principles of Justice, Principles of the Individual, and The Veil of Ignorance. And so this is really sort of pivotal notions about justice. And John Rawls is one of those founding theorists in terms of thinking about justice. And The Veil of Ignorance is a really important thought experiment. When you think about what would happen if we all had no idea where we would be in society, and we had to make decisions on things like healthcare, on things like financial compensation, disability, things like that? What if we had to make those decisions without knowing where we would actually fall in that system? If we did operate under this veil of ignorance, would we then have a more just society? Because if we didn't know that we would be wealthy, or we didn't know that we would be poor, would we actually create a society that was more equal than what we have now? So it's an interesting thought experiment to think through. You'll look at Dr. Lauderdale's and Dr. Cavender's, 2 faculty from Justice Studies, their piece on the theory of justice, where they really outline how this department came to be, how Justice Studies emerged, how it was created, and really thinking through what is this relationship of this idea of Justice Studies in relation to, say, legal studies or, say, criminal justice. So it's a nice historical piece about getting some familiarity with where the roots of Justice Studies came from. And then the last 2 pieces that you will look at are both looking and thinking through methodology. And so Linda Smith's piece is looking at decolonizing methodologies and recognizing the inherent unequal distribution of knowledge that has been created through really problematic manifestations of methodology and really poor practices. And so, unfortunately, ASU has a history of poor practices, particularly with Indigenous populations. And so, it's important to think through how we recognize methodology and not oppress those communities that are already marginalized or already oppressed. And then the last one that you'll look at is Eve Tuck's Suspending Damage, A Letter to Communities. And so here, she's trying to encourage us to move from what she calls damage-centered research, which is this idea that researchers go into communities that are damaged in order to help, in order to get monetary compensation, or in order to bring light to issues. But the focus is on the damage. The focus is on these communities as broken. And so instead, she's encouraging us to think about, what if we flipped and thought about it from a perspective of desire. So thinking about articulating our own stories and articulating stories as researchers based on desire rather than based on damage. And so it's a really interesting way to think through some of the ways in which we collect data, because particularly in justice studies, we collect data in impoverished communities. We collect data on those most marginalized. And so how do we then practice just methodologies? And so you also have your introductory discussion board post, you have your first original discussion board post and your first response post due this week, and you will also have your first weekly quiz. So a lot is going to happen this week. Make sure that you have your thinking caps on and that you're ready to go into this with an open mind. Obviously, we come to the study of justice from a variety of perspectives, and I think it's important that we recognize that and that we behave in a manner within this class, within the discussion board posts, etc., in a way that values humans and values human life. I think particularly given what occurred this past weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia, that we have to recognize the humanity of us all. And we have to think through the ways in which our thoughts and our language have consequences. And so I want us to practice a just lexicon in this class, wherein we think about people as humans and think about the humanity of people rather than attacking people or disrespecting people or things like that. Okay? So as always, if you have questions, I am here to help. Good luck this week, and I look forward to reading your work.